Hi, everyone. I'm back for another episode of Let's Talk About It, talking about student athlete mental health with Laura Jones, an associate professor at UNC Asheville and their mental health coordinator in their athletic department. Laura, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sydney.
Can you talk a little bit about your role at UNCA?
I have been faculty here in health sciences and neuroscience for the past 9 years. And then 8 years ago, at the request of student athletes who were taking my classes, started working with our athletics department. Our athletic director from day one, minute one, was completely on board with me coming in and just starting to talk with athletes, help athletes get connected to resources, and just are doing our best to shift the culture around mental health and athletics, both here and in our region and in our conference. So
it's definitely a necessity and a resource that's becoming just a hallmark of athletic departments and something that every athletic department needs to implement now, right? Like not even the next couple of years. What do those trainings look like, coaching perspective and an athletic department perspective?
Really, those trainings are starting from the ground up and we're just building on those. So the first part of those are just basic mental health 101. Like, what does it look like when an athlete's struggling? The idea that mental health is on a spectrum. It's not you just have a disorder, you don't, but that each one of us exists somewhere on the spectrum of well-being, and it can shift from day to day, from hour to hour in terms of how well-resourced we're feeling, how resilient we're feeling in that space. So allowing them to feel part of the bigger picture rather than just teaching them this is about your athletes, but this is how all of us fit into this.
Recently, I believe there was a bill passed in Maryland that required coaches in high schools and colleges to receive mental health training. And I can imagine that that's going to spread across the country really soon. As you said, mental health is on a spectrum, so with that, there's a lot of different treatment options. And I think treatment can sound a little bit scary. So I wanted to demystify some of those with you. How does mood tracking specifically help student athletes, or why would an athletic department want to implement that?
Oh, that's a great question. It's just an incredibly valuable tool for self-awareness. But the way that I talk to both my athletes and my coaches about it as well is you can use that to also look at patterns in play and patterns in performance and the overlap between how is my mental health or how is my stressors in everyday life, how is that then overlapping on performance? And what are some tools that I can use both with sports psych, which would be the performance end of it, or for classic mental health?
That's also a really cool way for coaches to see just general index of their overall team, not necessarily seeing every single person's individual information, but just overall, hey, this week your team was a little down this week, or average numbers to know how much do I push, how much slack do I give. I think that's awesome. Let's move on a little bit to journaling, meditation.
With journaling itself, again, can be a great tool for self-awareness. And for some people, it's just an amazing kind of tool for catharsis of just getting it out of your system. People are going to gravitate toward different practices for different reasons. And I think that's part of all of this, is figuring out what practices are going to be beneficial for you. I think we're hearing a lot about mindfulness right now, and I think there is an incredible utility to those practices. I tend to work with my athletes on the type of sport they play and trying to pair that with different types of mindfulness.
Just there, we've talked about 3 different types of treatment or strategies, right, to make someone more self-aware, to improve their mental health, things to turn to when they're really struggling. And those aren't even talk therapy. One of the main issues that we're seeing in athletic departments is just a lack of funds to pay for a licensed therapist. And then if you can get over the financial hurdle of that, there's the issue of time. There's the issue of athletes wanting to come in and speak about those specific issues with that person, right? There's all of these, barriers beyond even the financial aspect that keep athletes from getting resources and the help they need. What would you say people should be thinking about when they're trying to help their athletes with their mental health?
You can have all the money in the world, but if you don't have people there who are genuinely caring, those resources aren't going to be used. The way that we're able to do the work that we do now with the resources that we have now are through those collaborations and connections. And it's through collaborations with our Health and Counseling Center, our Dean of Students Office, but also organizations like The Zone, telehealth company that we work with, Mindflow, and others. It's just building relationships and building connections.
One thing I've been wrestling with as we have this mental health conversation is this idea that being, supportive of student athlete mental health is making athletes soft, right? Or it's prohibiting coaches from coaching the way they need to develop a winning program. What do you have to say about that?
I think that's a big misnomer is when we start talking about mental health, everybody thinks of the softer side of mental health. And that is definitely compassion, empathy. It's huge, right? But a lot of times athletes don't want to be treated differently, even if they are struggling. They don't want their coach to be soft on them. They don't want to have all of these exceptions made for them. And so there is this beautiful kind of balance between being a tough winning coach, right? While also letting your athletes know you're going to get their back if they're struggling. You're going to be able to show up for them and help them get connected. That level of buy-in with their coach, that level of comfort with their coach and trust can go such a long way.
I love that. I know for me as an athlete, as a person in general, that having good mental health in the moment hasn't always meant that I wasn't anxious or that I wasn't going through a hard time or that everything was perfect.
Yeah.
It just meant that I was able to handle it. I think that's awesome. I think that's a huge thing for a lot of coaches. So thank you for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.